Hello and good morning, Lucy. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing really well, thanks.
We got to talk about this book cover before we even jump into the storyline here, because this book cover belongs on walls all across the planet because it's so beautiful.
I agree. I adore it. I think the combination of the dancing with the London scene and the fairy tale element is perfect.
And it totally sets up the time era that you're talking about inside the story.
Yeah, so the novel is set at the end of the Second World War, and it goes back a little bit into the 1930s, but it's very much a period novel of that time.
What was that like for you to visit that as a creative person?
I love writing historical fiction because I find that the research element is very inspiring for me. I spent about 6 months researching for this novel before I started writing it. So reading memoirs from dancers at the time, books about the experience of being evacuated as well in the Second World War, which was a large element of the book. I also went to archives at the Royal Ballet School, which is where I trained, and looked at archives at the Royal Opera House. So to be able to immerse myself in a very, very real historical productions, ballet performances, but also just what it was like to live during the Second World War was inspiring. And the novel, the plot of the novel emerged out of that research.
See, I'm always inspired by people who go back into research, and especially when it comes to the Second World War, because it's a time period that's going to be forgotten if we don't have writers like yourself to bring out stories such as this.
Yes, and for me, it was wonderful to be able to write a novel that was about a story about the Second World War that's not often told. It's set among the real work of the Sadler's Wells Ballet Company, which is a company now we know as the Royal Ballet Company. But they had this amazing journey during the war. For a start, they put on so many productions. They continued to choreograph productions. They traveled all over the United Kingdom. They brought a lot of entertainment and inspiration and escapism for people. But they also were sent to Holland in 1940, to The Hague, when Holland, the Netherlands, was still neutral. And it was while they were there that Germany invaded, and they had to be evacuated, hidden in this countryside house in the woods, and then evacuated on a cargo ship. And it's this wonderful story that of art, of dancing, of the kind of bravery of people we don't necessarily always think of as related to the Second World War. And I really wanted to highlight this story and talk about the ways in which art is so important during times of conflict.
Oh yeah, and art is born from darkness, and isn't that what your character is all about? I mean, a dancer with a hidden past. To me, that's where the art begins.
Yes, my main character, Briar Woods, she's a ballet dancer, and during the war, it's a very formative time for her. She has a very close relationship with one of her best friends, but she also loses one of her best friends, and she feels that she is to blame for that. And she is struggling to come to terms with the decisions that she made and the friendship that she prioritized. And she also had, before the war, she had a relationship with a man that led to a very, very difficult decision in which she thought she might have to give up dancing. In the end, she didn't give up dancing, but she feels a huge amount of guilt for what she did give up. So while the war is over at the end of the book, for Briar Woods, she has a lot to learn and to grapple with.
Wow. Did you become her?
Did I become her?
As a writer, I mean, I will sit there and I become that character, and then sometimes it's like I'm more of that character than I am myself.
Yeah, and this was a really interesting thing to me because Briar Woods is such a flawed character. She makes decisions that are clearly wrong, but they're so understandable from my perspective. You know, when I was writing this, I loved her. I really understood what she was going through. I felt the pain of her past and the experiences she'd had and the confusion she had. She doesn't really know how to define herself because men have looked at her a certain way that's made her unsure who she is. And I suppose I felt very close to her. So it's very interesting reading reviews now because some people love Briar Woods and they feel the same way. But other people think that she's so flawed that makes her quite unlikable. And I'm not trying to write likable characters. I think I'm trying to write human characters with flaws and features that we can understand. But it's fascinating to me how divided she is for readers.
Well, see, that's exactly the reason why my wife enjoys the book, because she likes that little bit of conflict and where people do make mistakes. mistakes and people make decisions, because that to me is like it's role playing in the real world.
Yes, I think if we try and turn characters into black or white, good or bad, it just doesn't work. It's not real, and that's part of what I was writing about with the retelling of the fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty, which runs throughout the novel in lots of different ways. Because the story of the Sleeping Beauty that we know now, the Disney version, the ballet version, is quite straightforward. There's a good fairy, there's an evil fairy, love conquers all, and the castle wakes up from a 100-year curse. But the older, much older, darker, more gothic versions of this fairy tale that have been written by a huge number of different writers, they take away that simplicity. And I wanted to go back to those older, much more troubling versions of the fairy tale and think about, it's not possible to say that someone is entirely good or entirely bad, but also to think about why it is that we long for that. We long for certainty, because it helps us to understand the world, and especially during a time of conflict, during the Second World War, I think there was this desire to work out who was good, who was bad, and of course that isn't possible. And it's when we allow ourselves to accept uncertainty that we can see people for who they really are.
You know, I love the way that you break things down, because it really gives us the opportunity as readers as well as listeners to hear how it didn't just fall onto the plate. You actually had to sit there and figure it out and build this story.
Yes, it certainly had many layers to it, and I knew what I was inspired by. I knew I was inspired by the work of the Sadler's Wells Ballet Company during the war. I was inspired by the fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty. But from that comes so much. And certainly the book took me many drafts. So it changed, the structure of it changed as I was going. And I think the characters became richer and more complex with every draft that I wrote.
What's incredible about this, Lucy, is the fact that you're talking about a subject that many of us have never really, allowed to speak ourselves with. And the reason why is because we've always done the music, we've always done the artwork, but we've never done ballet. We don't see that side of the story, but yet it existed, and you're giving us a storyline that really gives us a reason to believe in it.
I think that ballet can be for everyone in any way that they wish. So one of the things that I have found so much joy from is returning to dance through my writing. I did train as a ballet dancer. Yes. I went to the Royal Ballet School in London, and ballet was part of my life. It was my identity, so I knew it very, very well. But it seems like this kind of elitist world, this private world that I was part of. And it's when I stepped outside of it that I could see actually everyone can engage with ballet. It can bring so much joy to people in different ways, either as an audience member, for example, during the Second World War, how many productions traveled to the different provinces of the UK. But also now I go to all sorts of different levels of ballet classes, and sometimes I go to ballet classes that are for adult beginners who have never danced before but want to have a go. And I think it's wonderful that dance can be opened up for absolutely everyone.
Yeah. While you were writing, did you feel the flow of dance? Because, I mean, you in every movement, there's got to be some sort of flow or dynamic.
Yes, I did go to quite a lot of ballet classes while I was writing this, more than I had been before. But I also reminded myself a lot of the performance of the Sleeping Beauty. So when I was at the Royal Ballet School, we rehearsed quite a lot of the solos, the fairy solos, so I reminded myself of all of those. I went to see a production of it, and I listened to the Tchaikovsky music while I was writing many of the chapters, so I felt very immersed in this.
My wife wants us to be on a live stage. I said, don't you want it to be a movie or some sort of series on Netflix? She goes, no, I want to see this on a live stage. I want it to be a ballet.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I can picture it now.
I mean, because what you're bringing to us right now, because we are the generation that fell back in love with all types of dancing, and for you to write a book about dancing, you're so into our lives right now.
I think so, and I love this about the way that dance in all its forms has become very popular. Of course, there are reality TV shows, but also with social media. I follow a lot of dancers on social media, and I love the way it shows us the behind the scenes. What does a dancer do in a day? it gives us inspiration, even if we're not necessarily going to go and tie on a pair of pointe shoes for ourselves. We can still find a lot to inspire us and find joy in from watching it.
I fell in love with ballet for one reason, because I'm a third-degree black belt, and I was studying up on martial arts movies, and it is written that ballet inspired martial arts movies. It is the same type of movement.
I can totally see that. There's a real sense of core control with dance. And ballet in particular, is taken by a lot of sports people.
Yes.
It gives you the flexibility, the balance, also coordination of movements. And also it wakes up your brain a little bit. When I go to a ballet class, you're doing a series of about 30 different exercises, and you have to listen so carefully and watch so carefully what the teacher is choreographing in front of you and pick it up instantly. And I think that it is very transferable for so much sport, and also lots of other types of dance. Most dancers will do some form of ballet class as their core. It's that kind of what you return to give you that sort of central discipline to your dancing.
Wow. Where can people go to find out more about you, Lucy? Because I want them to get into your writing and give you lots of love.
Well, thank you. Well, I have a website, which is lucyashe.com, and also Instagram, which is lucyashe_author. And The Sleeping Beauties was published a couple of weeks ago, and it's available from all bookstores. Oh, and it's in the book cover once again. It can't be one of those books that sits on a shelf. It has to be facing everybody, because when you look at this book cover, there's just so much. There's so much in it. Yeah, it is. It's very rich. I remember when I first saw when the publisher sent it to me, I was just overwhelmed. I think I might have cried. It was so beautiful. I love it. Well, please come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to talk to you. You be brilliant today, okay? Okay, bye. Thank you.